Hey everybody, and welcome to Naturalistics, a podcast dedicated to helping you become a better naturalist. My name is Stefan, and here with me is Matt.
What's up?
And today on Naturalistics, our 12th episode, it's kind of a mix-up.
Mix and mash.
We're going to do a book review. We've got some listener questions. Matt has some reflections on this past year. But,
I don't know if I have reflections, but I'll reflect my questions at you, maybe.
Matt would like us to reflect
I don't know.
this past year. And so we'll be getting into that in a bit. But Matt, you want to give us a quick update on how things are going?
Yeah. Thank you all for the downloads. November was our biggest month yet, and just really appreciate all the shout-outs and all the downloads, so thank you. And you can find us on Twitter, on social media. We're also on Instagram, and you can email us at naturalisticspod@gmail.com. Also, pretty exciting, I've been uploading all the episodes to YouTube. So we do have a YouTube channel, although it's very small right now. It just only has our episodes, the podcast on there. But we're thinking about maybe putting some other content on there soon, maybe every once in a while, putting something a little different on there. It's still naturalistics and still dedicated to helping you as a naturalist, but maybe in a different kind of way. So
that's exciting.
Yeah, should be fun.
Yeah.
Oh, I have one other thing. Just want to give a shout out to all the organizations out there that, they're wrapping up their end of the year stuff. It's nonprofits I'm talking about that are helping people get connected with nature, getting kids in particular outside, but anybody outside, and really getting to love and learn about their place, their wild places around them. So shout out to them, and if you have some extra money, if you find that you do donate to places at the end of the year or any time of year, please consider some of these organizations as an option. I mean, we really need to grow more people interested in nature over time, and the best way to do that is to get kids outside, enjoying the natural world and playing and learning and just being a human. Just being a human out in the woods or wherever you are. And yeah, do you have something to add, Stefan?
Well, I think, to me, it's like there are lots of different worthy causes to donate to, and many of them have to do with conservation, preserving parts of the natural world for people to enjoy. And I think it's important to consider whether you donate to a conservation organization, but maybe also donate to an organization that is actually inspiring people to value those places as well, because then when those people are in a place where they can do as you have done, following your example, they're going to value those same, they're going to share the values that we think are important in the future. And so it's a long term looking down the road to when people who right now have the means to donate and who value these natural treasures might not be around, and who's going to fill that space when the time comes.
Yeah, so, a lot of money gets thrown at conservation and endangered species and all kinds of stuff, but throw some money at some endangered human species, the naturalists, and we need to grow them from a young age. And and there's a lot of local organizations. I think wherever you are, there's got to be some place that's really doing a good job at this.
Yeah.
So find them, donate to them. We have White Pine Programs where we live, and they're an amazing organization. We'll put their link in the show notes. If you don't know, if you don't have a place to donate to, that is a really good option. So we really highly recommend them.
And if you maybe don't have the means to donate, but you're in the Seacoast area, check out some of their programs. They have programs for kids and adults.
Yeah, definitely. All right, so we're going to hit up our book review. This is our first review, right?
Well, we sort of did the field guide rating system thing, which wasn't exactly a review per se, but it was a very nitty-gritty sort of critique
we're diverging a little bit from the field. This isn't a field guide we're reviewing, but yeah, you're right. We did review field guides. This is a book. It's called The Naturalist Notebook by Bernd, Heinrich and Nathaniel Wheelwright. And they're New England naturalists, I would even call them almost like elder statesmen of the natural history world here in this part of the world.
Sure.
And they just have a tremendous amount of knowledge and tremendous amount of enthusiasm and skill as naturalists. And they're also really good writers and artists, so the book is covered in their art, mostly Bernd, Heinrichs, I think. But yeah, so it's a little different flavor than a field guide, but we wanted to take some time to talk about it because it is really cool, a really great book, and really relevant. It just came out.
Yeah, so I think one of the first things that comes to mind thinking about this book, because there's lots of this sort of thing out there. I feel like, like nature books, books that are designed to appeal to naturalists, people who are interested in learning about nature and studying nature. And I think one of the legs up that I think this style of book has over some others is that I feel like the content is maybe not unique to this book, but I feel like it's presented in a really friendly, like digestible way, which is not to say that it's like dumbed down or anything.
What is the content though?
So, okay, well the first half roughly of the pages that you get here are sort of different sections, different, I guess, elements of what it is that makes a good naturalist.
Yeah, so it's really in line with what we've been talking about on the
Very
podcast.
much, yeah. And so there's like different chapters or different little segments that talk about the different skills that you might develop to become a naturalist or to become a better naturalist, which I think is great. And like I said, there's a lot of writing about being a naturalist.
Yeah.
Ways to be more observant, be more attentive, things like that. But I think that the way it's presented in this book to me is it's approachable, I guess is a good word for it. It's easy to read. It's really interesting.
Yeah.
There's a lot of like little stories interspersed, so it's not dry.
Great. Yeah,
it's not
definitely.
like reading a textbook or like a, you could easily go down the road of like it's like the owner's manual of like being a naturalist, or it's also like you do this and you do this.
You own a naturalist?
And you do this, but this, the way these guys have assembled the first part of the book, which is like you said, geared to make helping people become better naturalists, is just fun to read, quite frankly, and it's got the illustrations sort of peppered in too.
Yeah.
So
the second half of the book is a journal, sort of like a phonology journal.
Yeah.
So if you don't know what phonology is, check out our episode on that. I think it's episode 6. But, keeping track of things over time. When the first flowers come out, when the first snows fall, when the first spring peepers are heard. And it's a cool little journal that allows you to keep track of stuff over a 5-year period. And I guess Nathaniel, or I think a lot of people call him Nat, but Nathaniel had a journal like this as a kid, and he's kept it ever since. And then that became the book. Was sort of creating this very simple form of keeping track of things.
Both authors have a little bit of like a walk down memory lane where they talk about their early journal keeping and how they can go back and reference those journals even many years later and look at things with dates and observations that they've recorded, and then compare that to their dates and observations that they're making many years later, which I think is neat.
Yeah, it's pretty valuable stuff.
Yeah, and so the format, I think, Matt, that you sort of touched on, the journal in the latter half of the book is sort of looks like a calendar. It has five years on the same page, which sounds odd, but the way it's arranged, the top row of sort of calendar squares is the first year, and then there's 4 rows underneath that of calendar squares, which are each of the next 5 years from when you start keeping track.
It's a spreadsheet.
It's a spreadsheet, sure, and
glorified. But it is sweet.
And so the nice thing about that, which they talk about, and they talk about sort of how they picture people using a journal like this, and why they designed it this way. The really neat thing to me is that you can compare very easily compare year to year observations, maybe observations that you make every year, like the first Phoebe that you see returning or something like that, and then you can look and see, that was on the 5th of that month that year, but then they weren't here until the 15th the following year, or something like that. And so you can see like, oh, that, you know, things are maybe changing over time, or maybe there's some like anomalous years, and then you can look at your other observations in that year and see how things, you know, was it just one species that seemed to have an anomaly, or was it like a trend overall? Like a lot of migratory birds were coming back later that year.
Yeah.
Which can help even some. I feel like we make a lot of observations that we don't even know we're making.
Yeah,
and I feel like this kind of journal keeping can sometimes clue you into your own observations and give them give them a little bit deeper meaning.
Yeah, good point. You know, and it's so simple that it takes very little energy to get your observations down. So it's like ultra simplified and just sleek. So it just takes very minimal discipline, time, and energy to do it.
Yeah,
and so that's something I really appreciate because I'm lazy.
Yeah, and if you've had if you've been in the naturalist loop for a while, you've probably had it recommended that you keep a journal, and maybe for some people that can be difficult. If you've had trouble keeping a journal like this in the past, you might try this because it is a low investment. It's like a lot of bang for your buck. The amount of energy you put into recording these notes, I think, will pay out much more over time, and I think it might even get you into journal keeping if you've been reticent to get into keeping a journal. And then also for folks who like to keep a more detailed journal and need more space to record, they recommend in here that you do that, but number the pages in your bigger journal, so that, and then put the page numbers in on this little spreadsheet, so that you can quickly reference those. Like if you say, oh, your note says something like Phoebe returned or something like that, then you have a page number and it talks about your observation. Maybe you have a story about the Phoebe when it came back and its behavior or something like that you want to maybe look up. Which
can be helpful. Yeah. If you have like an anomaly or something that you want to look into.
So overall, I think it's a really cool idea. I think especially the calendar idea is really what makes this book stand out to me, and as a useful tool for people to use.
I agree. And it reminded one of the things. So the illustrations are amazing, but I did want to mention one thing that I realized upon like seeing and looking and reviewing this book was that I really enjoy when natural history drawings are sort of given a lot of space. I felt like the illustrations are a little cluttered, especially on the cover. It sounds a little nitpicky, but it's something I realized about myself is I just really enjoy when the art is like sort of has a lot of space.
Yeah.
To be looked at.
It's an aesthetic thing.
I get a little like ADD overwhelmed or something like that when it's like a page full of text and then all these drawings around. That's the only thing I would say. Otherwise, I mean, would you recommend this book?
Absolutely. Yeah, I recommend it to folks who are already, naturalists who are already deep into this subject matter. I think there's a lot there.
I mean, it's not a feel good, but I give it an A. It's like, I don't know.
I don't know, Matt. I didn't see any range maps in there.
Oh, no, not the range map. Okay.
And I also think it's great for people just getting into natural history study,
especially the beginning stuff that really explains.
Yeah, really, really one of the better sort of general introductory pieces of literature on like the practice of being a naturalist and being good at it.
Cool. So the book was The Naturalist Notebook by Bernd, Heinrich, and Nathaniel Wheelwright. So check it out. We don't have an Amazon affiliate yet, but maybe someday we will. And we hope you enjoy it. If you get it, it's a good like Christmas gift or something like that.
Yeah.
So all right, let's move on.
All right, on we go.
So we're gonna hit some Q&A kind of. It's kind of like our weird, Matt and Stefan's weird version of Q&A, where we have some listener questions. We also have questions for each other. We've also been doing this for a whole year now, and we wanted to just take a pause and like be like, look back at the year and say, okay, what have we done so far? Let's like evaluate, sort of in a public setting, in that it's on the podcast.
Yeah, so we're accountable.
We're gonna look at some of these questions from listeners, and we also would like to get back to, we used to do the first half of the year or something like that. We were doing a listener question every episode, and then we cut that out for some reason, and I think we'd like to get back to that. because as our listener base is growing, we want to interact with all of you listeners more and more, and I think it's a really good way for you to send in a question, and then we can do our best to respond in what we can. But so if you have a question, anything at all about natural history or us or whatever, send it in. Best place to do that is sending it to our email at naturalisticspod@gmail.com, and send us a question. So with that further ado, here we go.
We'll do our best to answer.
All right, so the first one is, what's the difference between a bill and a beak?
Aha. So in terms of birds, I'm assuming we're talking about birds.
I think so too. I think we can assume that we're talking about birds.
Are we going to bring in the duck-billed platypus on this one?
Oh, that was too soon. Yeah, well, here's my take.
Okay, Matt and I do have a thing for marsupials.
And actually, we should pause. We're getting really off track. But the thing is, we didn't look this up. So this is just all off the cuff. So just so you know, FYI. Here we go.
Yeah, I think, so this is definitely something that you could just Google, right?
Yeah, correct.
But, so I'm assuming that the listener who submitted this question doesn't necessarily want the Google answer. They just want to know our take on it. So that's what
Agreed.
That's why we didn't look it
Agreed.
up.
So where we go? So, duck-billed platypus. I mean, bill versus beak.
Yeah.
So my thing is that bill is the proper name for a bird beak, for a bird beak, bird bill.
Right.
For the protuberance off of a bird's face, you call it a bill. No matter what. Hawk, duck, chickadee, hummingbird, penguin.
So, and in case you missed it, Matt did start keeping a life list, so
Indeed.
he has graduated into the realm of bird snob, and that's why he thinks that Bill is the proper name. I'm not going to say that I think Bill is the proper name, but I will say that I generally use
bird slob.
That would be me. I don't keep a life list. My observations are all over the place. So I use the term bill for pretty much most birds. I use the term bill. Occasionally for a raptor, for some reason, I have no idea where I got this, but I feel like if it's like on an owl or something where it has like that sort of like hooked or like the falcon like hooked bill.
Yeah, it looks kind of mean.
I feel like to me that's a type of bill that can sometimes be called a beak. I'm not saying it's not proper.
All right, and so for me, beak is more of a generic term for the end of an animal's face. So, I don't think there's not many mammals that have beaks, but there are some. And I can't think of one right now. Mm-hmm. But lizards, I consider some lizards have beaks. Dinosaurs have beaks. Some insects can have like a beak. A beak to me is kind of like, and also octopus have beaks.
Ah.
Like, it's just generic name for like a hard
protuberance
mouth thing on an animal's face.
Okay.
We really didn't do our research, but that's where we stand. That's where we stand.
Wow. No, you're making me feel like I need to think more about this.
You do need to think more about this. Bird slob. Okay, next question.
All right. Rolling forward.
A lot of people were asking about my ant colony. I posted some pictures online about this ant colony that I have, and I felt like I need to tell people about it because there's so many people who are like, "What? You have an ant colony? What?" And so there's a little bit of a backstory here, where basically, sometimes the teacher actually ends up being the student. I think that happens a lot for me. I teach kids for work. Sometimes the kids actually teach me a lot more than I am able to teach them. And I had one particular kid who was absolutely obsessed with ants, like to an absurd, amazing level of nerdiness. And this young man, he started his own colonies of ants, and he actually was moving on from the program he was in, and he was going to do other stuff. And we had spent some time finding ant colonies out in the woods, some really cool ones like Allegheny mound ants and stuff like that. And on one of the last days that he was on the program, he ended up gifting me an ant queen, Camponotus pennsylvanicus, which is just, a carpenter ant queen. And it was so cool. And it was like in this test tube, and basically he gave me all these instructions about how to care for it. And then, now I think it's been like 6 months at least later, she's had eggs, she's hatched the eggs, there's workers now, then she's got all these larvae, and then now they're in a terrarium. They're chilling out on my porch for the winter, and I'm hoping next year that the colony grows bigger and bigger. But I just think it's a cool story because someone much younger than me taught me a lot and was able to mentor me in ant keeping. I'm excited to see how they do. So yeah, that's basically the backstory.
One of the things that I've noticed, or something that has stuck with me watching your ants, is just how efficient those little bodies must be, because there's like, she was in there alone, seemed like for so long.
Months.
Laying eggs, like tending to them, like there was without any input.
Yeah, I didn't put. Like, you're not supposed to feed them for their whole. They had the whole beginning period, and
it's just incredible.
And she's able to start her whole colony just with the energy stores that she has. Yeah, it is incredible, and it's also so cool to think like, these social insects, how amazing their communication systems are, and their. They're kind of like, they end up being like one organism, like one individual is actually the colony, as opposed to, where there's you and there's me and there's other people and we're all kind of individuals, but it just makes you wonder about like what actually is an individual in the natural world, what constitutes that level. So, pretty cool.
Yeah.
All right, next question. There's been a lot of talk about mountain lions in Maine. Can you separate out fact from fiction? Good question.
Short answer, yes. There is a way.
All right, next question. No, I'm just kidding. All right, so this one...
It can be tricky.
One's...
It's one of those things like everybody wants to see a mountain lion where you don't expect to see a mountain lion, Like where a mountain lion shouldn't turn up is like means you really, really want one to turn up there. For some reason, it's like there's like a human thing there.
I agree. Yeah, there's something about these big predators that I think really draws out our imagination and our connection to the wilderness and our connection. I don't know. It's just crazy. Like, we see monsters where there's no monsters sometimes. And the other thing is like, I think there's not a good consensus on what constitutes evidence of presence or absence, and there's not a lot of consistency in terms of what constitutes a breeding population as well. So
I think the evidence piece is like, that's the point on which separating the fact from fiction hinges.
Correct.
Like I think that's the crucial, if you're interested in,
that's where we stand
filtering between like, okay, this is for sure fact, and this is not for sure fiction, and this is maybe something in between. That's what we want to dig into.
And I think that I want to slice the evidence part in half again and say anecdotal evidence doesn't count as evidence. If you have a neighbor or someone who says they saw a mountain lion, that's great, and it doesn't mean you shouldn't believe them. It doesn't mean that they're not telling the truth. It doesn't mean that they're right or that they're wrong. It just doesn't constitute evidence.
Yeah, so if you're interested in fact and fiction, which are the words that the listener used, facts are facts.
Yep,
and they need to be supported by evidence.
Yeah, I think that's where we stand on it. And again, it doesn't mean like it's my intuition about like what I know about that uses what I know about mountain lions and how ecology is changing over the last couple of years, and things like that. There's probably mountain lions in New England and in Maine. I think if you put a gun to my head or you put a bunch of money on the table and said,
"Whoa,
do you think there's mountain lions in New England? Yes or no?" And I had to answer yes or no. Like I had to give one of those. I would probably say yes, because the probability says yes. But the problem is that the evidence isn't there, not solidly. And I think Stefan and I talked about doing something maybe more focused on this, and we have done some research and pulled up more nitty gritty stuff on this topic, so I think we're gonna cover that maybe on YouTube or something, but it's probably not going to be a whole podcast.
I remember like some years back when there was the one that was hit in Connecticut. I think that National Geographic did a piece on the changing dynamics of, in particular with mountain lions, and are they, it explored the subject, and that's a cool thing to check out if if you have your library has National Geographic old copies, or maybe on the website or something. But I thought that was interesting, and I think they talk a little bit about like the land, the cultural and physical landscape in the East, in the Northeast in particular, is quite different now than it was at the time when cougars were extirpated from here. And I feel like that is...
Which was 1938, was the last time there was a mountain lion.
Seen in Maine, right?
Shot in Maine. That was the last one killed.
Of course, shot in Maine.
Yep.
Yeah, and so I think that's what... I think that context is what makes this topic so interesting, and I think that's part of why we want to explore it a little bit further.
Yeah, it deserves more attention than what we can give you right now. But suffice it to say, we need sufficient evidence, and evidence comes in a couple different forms, but they're pretty narrow and they're very specific, like DNA, which comes from scat, blood, bodies, stuff like that. Mm-hmm. Tracks that need to be identified by tracking experts. My preference would be a track and science specialist from the CyberTracker system. Those are kind of the two main areas. Videos and photos are for me, they're in between anecdotal and hard evidence.
Yeah.
And videos are a little bit more better than photos, but again, we'll do some. We're gonna do something on this, so stay tuned.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Fire away.
All right. So now it's my turn to ask some questions.
You have some questions of your own.
Yeah. Well, they're for me too, but I want to hear what you think. So it's been a year of Naturalistics. It's been a lot of fun thinking about this stuff and creating a podcast that really focus on you all, the listeners, as naturalists, and we're doing our best to try and help you become a better naturalist, whatever that may mean.
Well, to be clear, to help us all become better naturalists.
And that's one of the things, right? Here's one question. Do you think you're a better naturalist now than you were a year ago?
Short answer, yes.
And I agree. For me, just doing the podcast has helped me really formulate and congeal my concepts and thoughts about some of this stuff in order to present it.
Yeah, I feel like in the past I've always just done this sort of stuff like because I wanted to, and now it's like, wait, am I doing a good job? Like, am I doing this well?
Yeah, it forces you to ask that question.
Yeah, thinking in terms of like, what's important to discuss. How can people become better naturalists? How can I become a better naturalist? It's put this whole new context around things that I already love doing.
Yeah,
that is sort of like I'm constantly like tracking myself.
Yeah,
and watching like, am I
definitely
am I making like good observations? Am I asking good questions?
Yep.
What am I curious about right now, and why? Am I following that up, or why am I not following that up?
There are ways to improve as naturalists. Is one of like the things that I think I've found in the last year.
Yeah.
Since we started the podcast, like it is something that you can be better at over time, and you can actually not only acquire knowledge, which I think is what most people would consider what makes you a better naturalist, is that you know more stuff. But I think that we've found through our work here that's not really the whole picture. It's more, I think the process is more important. And
I think the gathering of knowledge is almost more of a byproduct. I don't think it's like part of the actual picture.
Yeah, but it becomes the focus. So, I mean, I think our goal is to continue focusing on the process of natural history, of being a naturalist, and refine that and get that stuff to you guys, listeners.
Yeah, that's where
in the best way we can. So that gets to my other question, this Triforce idea. So if you're a new listener, if you didn't listen to episode 1, if you haven't heard us offhand mention the Triforce, it's this idea that started the podcast, which is basically that comes from the question, what is a naturalist? Mm-hmm. And then finding that there's not really sufficient stuff out there, and we defined it by this Triforce idea.
Yeah.
Which is curiosity. It's a 3-part process, which is curiosity, observation, and storytelling. And without any one of those three elements, you're not a naturalist. And the more you do those things, the better you do those three things, the better a naturalist you are. So that's kind of like the concept.
Yeah, that was like the springboard, the beginning. I remember after work one day in a parking lot, drawing the Triforce diagram in like the road dust on the back of my truck.
Oh my god!
That was like the seed of Naturalistics.
Yep, never forget that.
So yeah, and from there, you have to then define what those three things are, and I feel like that's something that we're constantly
I agree
continuing to look at.
Like, what is journaling?
Yeah,
like, does journaling fall into the storytelling, or is
it a recording of an observation?
Yeah, I don't know. It's just an example. But the question I have for you is, how do you think is that concept holding up a year later?
I would say yes. I think to me the core piece there with the Triforce is still relevant, and we don't always necessarily we're not always like constantly referencing the Triforce in the things in the topics that we discuss, but it's there. And
the Triforce.
We don't need to point it out when it comes up. I feel like I need to get my act together and do a little write up of that first episode.
We do,
and get that on the website, just so that people can quickly, if they're just jumping in and starting to listen now, they'll be able to read up on that if they're curious about it. And see kind of where we're coming from.
It kind of helps us it's our guiding principle for what we're doing. So,
all right, Matt, I got a question for you.
Shoot.
How has it been working with me as your partner on this over the past year?
Okay, well, one thing I just want to mention before I answer that. Just some context to Stefan as an animal. Observations here, okay?
They already know.
Oh, he's good.
They know.
What do they know?
They know it hasn't been easy for you.
What do you think I'm about to say?
Oh, what? Yeah, you're asking me another question.
I didn't even say anything.
You're turning my question on myself here.
Okay. Well,
it's classic, Matt.
It's over then. We're done.
No. What were you going to say?
Okay, what I was going to say was that Stefan is an amazing writer, but he won't write. And when he does write, it's on paper. And I think it's hilarious to try. It's like herding pangolins to try and get him to write something on the computer and send it to me. It's so ridiculous.
Yeah, it's a struggle.
All right, that's me venting for a second. Well, one of the things that I joke about sometimes is that I created the podcast to get Stefan on the internet.
Of course, there's always an ulterior motive.
So actually, the whole thing is just designed to get you on the internet.
Okay.
All right, I think that's going to do it.
It probably more than
did it. All right, so just check it out. Check us out on YouTube now, and send us a question for next month, naturalisticspod@gmail.com. Thanks for all the great feedback and listens this year. Really appreciate everything. Have a wonderful holiday.
Yeah, Happy New Year, right? Because our next recording won't be till January.
Yeah, we'll be in a little while, and and keep a lookout for that video on mountain lions we'll be putting out there. So, see you later.
Thanks.